So yesterday, Football Manager finally announced their 5 main headline features for FM23, which was great for me considering I was not in the house. I was out at a gig. A little bit annoying, and by the time I got back, I discovered that the video was in fact 42 minutes long. Little bit excessive, lads, not gonna lie to you. But the most important thing is that we do now have more information about FM23 and what the new things are gonna be in the game, so let's talk about it. But before we get into the video, I've got some good news for you. If you haven't yet pre-ordered FM23, then I have partnered up with Fanatical in order to give you a 29% discount. That's right, if you click the link in the description and use the code FM23MBreezy, by the way, you don't have to do it yourself. If you click that link, it will be automatically applied for you, so that saves you a little bit of time as well. Click that link in the description and you'll be able to get the game for just £32.05, which is much cheaper than you'll be able to get it on Steam. So if you do want to pre-order the game, you haven't done so already, please consider using my link. I'll very much appreciate it. Now we've got that out of the way, let's get into it. Let's talk about then the 5 main headline features of FM23. So first on the list then is the brand new squad planner, but it's not just the squad planner. No. They have absolutely overhauled recruitment and scouting as we know it. So essentially, if you've ever used the squad depth screen on Football Manager, this is basically a rework of that, meaning that you can go into your squad planner and not only plan ahead for this season in terms of ranking the players that are currently at your club from what you consider to be the best to the not so best, but you can also add players not only from your shortlist but your youth squad as well. And this is great not only because it makes, come up for a summer window, you can plan how you want your squad to look come the start of the season, but you can even go a couple of steps further than that and plan for not only the next season, but the season after that as well. Alongside that, then, you also have this new thing called Recruitment Focus, which is basically a rework of the scouting assignments page that you have in your scouting centre. And yes, okay, this is a little bit of a patchwork on that, and they basically just changed that to make it a little bit more, I guess, user-friendly, which I think was needed. Like, if you ever use scouting assignments on FM, it's a lot of clicking through to different screens just to basically say to your scout, hey, by the way, can you go to Colombia and find me a Wonder Kid, please? Another positive they also mentioned in the video is that it should also reduce the amount of inbox items you get, because now all the information you get when you scout a player is just going to go into your scouting centre and you'll get sort of one email about that. And what's even better about this is they've basically redone the way scouting works. So when you scout a player and you go onto his page and you can see it could be 50-60% done, they've got rid of the percentages. The percentages are no longer a thing when you're scouting a player in FM23. And even further to this now, there are now 4 key stages of the scouting/recruitment process in FM23. So basically, rather than getting about 20 different scout reports land in your inbox and sort of just looking through them and getting a little bit of information overload, you can now tell your scouts to look for a certain type of player based on criteria you set. So let's say, for example, I want to find a decent target man. I'll tell my scouts to look for a striker who's about 6'5" as a minimum height, has got good heading attributes and maybe a good headers-1 ratio. They will go away and eventually bring me a list of players that match all the criteria that I've set, and they'll even include a little bit called near misses or near matches. I can't actually remember, to be honest, which will show you the players that just don't quite meet all the criteria you're looking for, but might be a good alternative option for you if you can't get those sort of 4, 5, 6 players that they bring you as like the perfect options for you. And that will all now sit in your scouting centre. And listen to the way they'll talk about it and the way they sort of demonstrated how it was going to work. I do think it is going to make scouting and recruitment a lot more refined and a lot less, again, it's that information overload, just getting loads of inbox items with scout reports. It makes scouts a lot more important as well. It makes your whole recruitment team feel like they are working as a team, which I think is a positive change. There's a few other bits around this sort of new part of the game as well. So agents, for example, obviously in the last few editions of the game, you were able to go to an agent of a player you tried to sign to get an idea of what wage they were looking for and what sort of fee the club would be looking to sell that player for. And that is still in the game this year, but they've just fleshed it out a little bit more. So now you can go talk to an agent, you can have a little bit more of a back and forth. So if he says this player wants 60 grand a week, but you only want to give him 40 grand a week, you can go back and say, well, okay, that doesn't really quite work for us. Is there a bit of a compromise we can find here? Maybe get him on a lower wage. And the really cool thing with this is you can now do this with players in your own squad. So when you've got players who are running down their contracts, you need to think about renewing them, rather than just going straight into the contract negotiation screen, you can actually talk to their agent to get an idea of, again, what terms they're exactly looking for and try to come to a bit of a compromise or an understanding before you get to that negotiation screen, which, again, it's good. I can't tell you the amount of times I've tried to renew a player's contract when they come to me asking for a new one, or I've just noticed their contract's running down and they're on about, let's say, 20 grand a week, and all of a sudden they're asking for 95 grand a week. It would be nice to sort of speak to the agent, get an idea of what they're looking for before being blindsided by these ridiculous demands that players sometimes have. We've all been there, surely. And last but not least, and where this whole recruitment overhaul comes full circle, they have made changes to the recruitment meetings. And basically now, when you take a new job at the start of a save, you're not going to get bombarded with players that your recruitment team think you should sign. They're actually going to sort of ask you what it is you're looking for, let you know what players' contracts are expiring, what ones might need to be moved on. And then in a few weeks, they'll come back with a list of targets based off what you have told them. And also, when it comes to deadline day, there'll be a little bit more of a deadline day meeting for recruitment as well, just being like, here are some players that might be available, here's some players that might want to leave, here's some players attracting interest. It gives a little bit more purpose to the recruitment meetings, which is, I think, really good. When they first introduced this, I was a big fan of it, in theory, because it was something I did actually want in the game, but I used it, when it first came in, I used it once or twice in the first season, and since then I've not touched it since. I think it came in FM21, I didn't use recruitment meetings at all for FM22. I think now there's a little bit more of a purpose. I'm hoping that I'll use this more, because I do think it has the potential to be a good feature. Given how it went last time, I don't know how confident I am that it's actually going to be that useful for me, because I think with recruitment, a lot of people are set in their ways of how they find players, right? And I think it's going to be quite difficult to deviate from those methods if you've been doing them for the last sort of 5-6 years. But fingers crossed, this will make that whole process a little bit easier. Maybe your director of football or your chief scout or whoever in these meetings can bring you a bit of a hidden gem that you wouldn't have otherwise found. Hopefully. That would be nice, wouldn't it? So next up then, probably the second biggest part of this announcement video was the improvements to not only the match engine, but the animations and defensive tactics. Ooh. So let's start with the new out of possession tactics. When you go into your tactics screen and click on out of possession, there will be now new instructions, such as your defensive line, whether you want to hold it or drop a little bit deeper. Pressing traps are now a thing, whether you can trap inside or trap or outside. I'm going to be completely honest, I'm not quite sure what that means, but I'm looking forward to finding out. And there's also cross engagement as well, which is basically whether you want to try and stop crosses or invite crosses on. So obviously that depends on whether you're confident enough in your central defender's ability to head balls away, or if you're not that confident, you can actually, you can focus more on getting your fullbacks to close wingers down and stop them from getting crosses into the box, which I think that is a lot better than what we've had with the sort of defend wider, defend narrower system that we've had in the last couple of editions. It's just a little bit more clearer, and it gives you a little bit more of an understanding of what that's actually going to do. Like, but it's that sort of thing, isn't it? Explain it to me like I'm 5. That's what I feel like FM have done with these, which I do greatly appreciate, because I'm a bit of an idiot sometimes. With the lines of engagement and defensive line, they've changed those as well, so they've introduced mid blocks and low blocks. Again, it's not something that every single Football Manager player will fully understand, but knowing how in-depth FM goes, I'm sure there will be a lot of explanations of how to do that. But what it essentially means is there is now an ability, in theory, to sort of soak up pressure and hit teams more effectively on the counter-attack and basically play defensive football, which in the last few FMs you've not really been able to do. The sort of meta in terms of tactics has always been either high line of engagement and high defensive line, or standard for both of those, and you never really drop to sort of low and very low, because it just doesn't work. Everyone's spoken about it, it feels like, for at least the last 3 editions of the game. You cannot play effective defensive football. If you're a championship team, you get Man City away in the FA Cup. You can line up with a back 5 and try and set up as defensive as you can. You will still probably get battered 5-0, and you won't really see the effects of your defensive tactic. Now, hopefully with this, you'll probably still lose, but it'd be nice to actually see basically forcing teams better than you to have to work hard to break you down and win games, which I do think is something that's needed. And also just the idea of having some variety in terms of the tactics. Even though we can all mess about with the formations and where the players are on the pitch and the attacking instructions and all that, ultimately attacking football has been king in the last few FMs, which is great from an entertainment perspective. I do get that, but just having that variety to play defensive, or, again, that sort of soaking up the pressure of a better team and then hit him on the break effectively. I love counter-attacking football, so for me, this is a big plus point. They have also made changes to AI managers, which basically now, using data points, they are trying to best replicate each individual manager or AI manager that's in the game, meaning in theory that when you come up against different managers in the Premier League, for example, you will notice those different styles. If you come against Jurgen Klopp, you'll get more of a high pressing game. If you come up against Pep Guardiola, they'll pass it around for ages before giving it to Erling Haaland. Or if you come against someone like Antonio Conte, for example, that 5 at the back, solid defensive system and counter-attacking system, which Spurs have used this year, you'll actually hopefully be able to see. It's very difficult to judge this just based on what they say from this video, because that's only really something you're going to notice when you're actually playing the game and you're a few seasons in and you're playing against a variety of managers. But in theory, this should be really cool. The one question I do have is, though, I always kind of was under the impression that was the case with AI managers, that they would, you would notice their style of play and that you would notice them adapting to what you're doing in games. Has that not been the case this entire time? Maybe it has, and it just hasn't been that effective, and now we're actually going to see it work as it was intended to. Who knows? They've also made changes to the goalkeeper animations, so they're like goalkeepers now save with their feet and they come out and, they'll sort of make themselves big and make saves that way. They used a bunch of terms in the video that I've never heard before, so okay, I'll take their word for it. The one thing I will say, and if you watch my video on things I think FM should fix for FM23, goalkeeper animations and goalkeepers in general was on that list. So I'm delighted to see they have put so much into the goalkeeper animations. I did see some of the footage from like the whatever build was used in that video, and I understand it's a work in progress, it's not the finished game yet, but there are still things that I saw goalkeepers do, and when they concede goals, that it still looks a little bit ropey to me. In line with the sort of tactical defensive side of it, that is also now better represented in the match engine, and that is actually something that I've spoke about, not necessarily in YouTube videos, but on streams and stuff. I've mentioned how the defensive AI doesn't look as clean as the attacking AI did in FM23. Hopefully now, and what I mean by that is just in terms of the way the teams defend in the engine, basically. It does feel like a lot of the time you're watching all these attacking players do really awesome things, but the defenders are basically just either running next to them and not really doing much to try and stop what's happening. Whereas now, they're not going to lunge in for slide tackles all the time. They're actually going to try and move to intercept passes, and it's just going to hopefully look a lot more fluid and a lot more cleaner. Some of the footage that they did show us of like the counter-attacking play and the defensive play, that's the sort of work that comes to mind. It all looks really, really fluid. But again, it's difficult to get a real grasp of it until we've had the game and played it for a few months, let alone a few weeks. And they've also added more animations in, like outside the foot passes, again, chest and volleys. It's not going to be in the exact same action. There's actually going to be a little bit more, again, fluidity to it. And again, it all sounds great in theory. I can't wait to get my hands on it and actually experience it myself, but I don't think the proof is going to be in the pudding with this one until at least halfway into the game cycle, I don't think, where you're a few seasons in and you've really got to grips with how the match engine plays. But in theory, it all sounds really, really good. So next up then is the UEFA licenses, but before we get into that, I'm going to ask you for a very quick favour. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and drop a like on the video as well. And also, if you've seen the video from FM and you've seen all the new features, please get in the comment section and let me know your thoughts. I'll be replying to as many comments as I can, but I'm very interested to hear your opinions on what FM has announced, whether it be positive or negative. I'll be very interested to read that. So get in the comment section and let me know. So UEFA competitions are fully licensed in this year's game. You've got the Champions League, the Europa League, the Europa Conference League, and the UEFA Super Cup, I believe. And when this was first announced, obviously this is really, really cool. I'm a fan of this. Let's get out of the way. Let's get out of the way nice and early. I think this is great. But when this was first announced, a lot of people did make the case of, well, this is fine, but we can just get badge packs and put the badges in ourselves. I don't really see what this adds to the game. But let me tell you this. The new in-game graphics and the way your squad comes up and that sort of stuff, and just having the branding in the stadiums, and apparently the music's in the game this year. Miles tweeted that out. Like, here's the tweet. Miles has confirmed that the Champions League and the Europa League and Conference League music is going to be in the game this year, which for content creation is not great because, hello, copyright strikes, but for you playing, it will help with bringing that immersion. And also the new way that the sort of group stages and knockout games are drawn, it's a whole new screen. It's completely redone. That old way of just auto draw or skip, that's gone now. It's with the licensing, they have been able to completely redo the way the games are drawn, which I think, look, I'm a massive fan of immersion in Football Manager, and I think anything they implement into the game that is going to give you greater immersion and enable you to lose yourself in your save, I think is fantastic. I'm never going to complain about that. And I think the new graphic stuff they've done with this looks absolutely incredible. I am really, really thrilled with this. And the podiums look great as well, like with the branding and everything. Apparently I've added the competition badges to the sleeves. Don't quite know how you're going to be able to see that using the 3D engine because you can't get too close to the players, but it's a nice touch at least. If you can actually notice it, that will be quite cool. And that's all I've really got to say about the UEFA licenses, really. I think it's great that it's in the game, and I think what they've been able to do graphically with that, in terms of giving you that greater immersion. If you're someone who likes to get lost in a save, this will absolutely be a part of that. I remember when they added all this into FIFA, and even with the Premier League licenses when I added into FIFA, when I used to play career modes, like, I know, sorry. But it did honestly make a big difference. I felt like it just made me feel a part of this world, and I think this now is going to have the same effect on Football Manager, and especially if you're doing a lower league save and you get yourself from the lower tiers into the Europa Conference League, the Europa League, and then the Champions League, like not necessarily in that order, but you know what I mean? It's going to feel like such a reward seeing all that branding, seeing all of those graphics when your squad pops up and it's with the Champions League logos and everything. It's going to be great. So if you're a fan of immersion, don't just look at it as, oh, they've added some badges in, what's the big deal? I think the graphical stuff is really, really cool. Is it enough to be a headline feature? Despite all of what I've just said, I'm not so sure. So next up then, the next big thing that they announced was supporter confidence, and this is a thing that is going to work in tandem with your sort of board confidence, club vision, that sort of thing. And essentially, from what I can gather anyway, or how they described it, it's dynamic. It's dynamic supporter confidence, meaning that it will differ depending on what club, in what country you're in. So for example, this year I'm doing spoilers for people who watch my Twitch channel, put link in the description by the way, I'm going to be doing for my first main save, a save in Italy, which I'm very much looking forward to. And I feel like it's fairly well known that ultras are a big thing in Italy, and for certain clubs they do have a bit of an influence on the club and the boardroom and all that sort of stuff. Maybe not ultras, maybe it's more support groups, but you know what I mean. That it seems to be a big part of Italy. And same with Germany. Obviously, Germany has I believe it's the 50+1 rule. I think that might be wrong, actually. But you know what I'm talking about when I say that fans do have an influence in the boardroom. And with this, it would appear, hopefully, anyway, that if the fans aren't happy with how you're doing, that could impact on whether or not you lose your job and impact your job security. Because if they want you to play a certain way, so okay, West Ham is the example here for me anyway, right? West Ham fans always go on about the West Ham way and playing a certain style of football. If that's going to be in the game, but you're playing quite defensive, slow, boring football, and they get annoyed about that, that could affect your job security, which I think's really good. It all just depends. I'm hesitant. It all depends on whether or not it works as well as FM want it to work. Again, I don't think that's something you're really going to see until you get your hands on the game. But I think, again, it's one of them things that, in theory, could be a really cool way of playing the game. And similar to, actually, I didn't make this point about when talking about the match engine stuff, it could make the game a little bit more difficult. If you play with a club or manage a club that's got a very demanding fan base and has a big influence on the way the club's run, if you get off to a bad start and lose a few games or go on a bad run of form and then the fans turn on you, it can make it really difficult for you to turn it around and save your job, which I do think is a good thing to have in the game. There should be a little bit more challenge there. For me, this will work as long as it's dynamic and as long as it actually has an effect on your job security. If it's neither of those things and it's just a second screen, that's not great. We'll have to see. Again, proof will be in the pudding when we've actually played the game. And last but certainly not least, the final main headline feature that was included in this video: dynamic manager timelines. Yeah. That was my reaction to. So, for this video, I've written some notes on everything that was included in this video. And what I wrote down for dynamic manager timelines, which was, again, the final feature of this video, which they spent about 2 minutes on, was simply the word meh. Because that's how I feel about it. Is it a terrible addition to the game? No. It basically replaces the milestones page. You know when you go on your manager milestones, you can see transfers and where you've moved clubs and players you've signed, all that sort of stuff. It now puts it in this nice little timeline that gets included into your end of season review, and you can look back at some of the key moments like player debuts or giving a youth player a debut or new signing, stuff like that. And supposedly, I think if you're doing a long-term save, you can look back at this at the end of a 20-year save and look at all your key moments and have a little bit of nostalgia, which I do think is really cool. Maybe not really cool, but it's cool. Would I have included it in a 42-minute long video about headline features? No. For the simple reason that it's just not that exciting, is it? This is something that if Mars had tweeted out a few weeks out from release, you'd go, oh, that's all right. So, yeah, I've not really got much to say, to be honest. Meh. That's all I've got for dynamic timelines. Looks all right. Not exactly a game changer, though, is it? So, when all is said and done, what do I, M Breezy, think of the feature announcements for Football Manager 23? Oh, boy. I think I've been mostly fair and actually mostly positive when talking about a lot of this stuff. But the question is, I think anyway, are these worthy enough of being listed under headline features? I'm not entirely convinced they are. I think the issue they've got is, when in a 42-minute video, first of all, it shouldn't have been 42 minutes, but when they've got a video that long going in depth on the new features, and you start with a massive recruitment overhaul, like, it's not just the recruitment plan. I've seen a few people sort of be like, oh, is that all they've really added? Like, no, it's the main new thing, but it's a part of this sort of drastic change to recruitment in FM as we sort of know it at this point. So if they'd started with this brand new recruitment system and scouting system, and then went into the match engine stuff, and then went into UEFA stuff, those 3 points, I was like, okay, this is all sounding really great. If they had then gone into, here's our brand new set piece UI. We've completely changed how set pieces are created. Here's how it now looks and here's how it now operates. And then finished on, World Cup's coming up in the same month we're releasing this game. So we've made changes to international management. I think that would have been a really strong feature announcement from FM. The fact they ended it on supporter confidence and a dynamic manager timeline, it just, as a whole there, that feels, as a collective, feels quite weak to me. I know I'm only really picking on those last two, but I think the set piece UI, and for me anyway, international management not essentially being an actual part of the game compared to what you can do in club management, is such a big issue. I think if you had those two things with the other three, it's a really strong announcement. As a collective, I don't think it's that strong. I'm a little bit underwhelmed, if I'm being completely honest. Now, am I going to buy the game, and am I going to play the game all year? Absolutely I am. I love Football Manager, and I'm sure a lot of you do feel the same. But both can be true. You can still be excited for the new game and want to play it, and still want more, and still want the game to be as good as it possibly can be. I think ultimately the main disappointment for me is the set piece UI not being mentioned. I think a few people are speculating they might still announce changes to it, even just to get rid of some of the glitchy bugs that have come with it. But for me, the fact that it's not included in this video, but dynamic manager timelines are, says to me they've not made any radical changes to the way set pieces are set up, and that for me is incredibly disappointing. And graphically, I did not for a second, I don't think, and if anyone did, I think that'd be ludicrous, but I did not for a second expect FM to announce a brand new graphics engine that looks like FIFA. Like, I don't think FM's ever going to get to looking like FIFA anyway, but I wanted to at least see some steps forward. I think Nick Madden used the word foundations when talking about the new animations this year. He said in FM22, they laid down the foundations of how animations are going to look in the game moving forward, and now they've been able to build upon that, which I think is fantastic. I would have liked to have seen some foundations for how they were going to build on a new graphics engine in this year's game. And from the looks of it, and I could come back to this in a few videos time and go, they did make changes, it just wasn't in the video. My bad. But from the footage I've seen in the video, it looks exactly the same as FM22, which looked pretty much the same as FM21. And FM20 was, you know, there was an improvement between FM20 and FM21, but you know what I mean? For me, there's not enough improvement at a quick enough rate for me in terms of the graphics. And even if they just improved the stadiums, I'd have been over the moon with that. But yeah, overall, the things they've announced, yeah, they're good, and they're going to make the game a better experience to play. I don't think the first 5 headline features you announce, I don't think it's as strong as it probably could have been. I will say this though, and it's something that I have seen. I was looking through Reddit this morning to look at the reactions from it, and I've seen something I've seen a lot, and which was people saying improvements to current features within the game are not new features. I see what they're saying. I do kind of disagree with that. I do think that if you are able to take something that's already there and make it infinitely better, then I do think that you can label that as a new. Because what more new stuff can you really add to Football Manager at this point? At this point of Football Manager's existence, and the way football is right now, it's for such a game that's so in depth as well. You're quite limited in terms of what brand new things you can put in the game. Like we had the data hub last year. Now we got the squad planner this year. Past that, I'm scratching my head thinking what more they could really add. So really, for the next few games, I want to see radical improvements to things like the graphics engine and the set piece UI. So I do think you can improve on what's currently there and class as a new feature. So have that, Reddit. So yeah, those are my thoughts overall on what's been announced for FM23. Like I said, I'm still very much excited for FM23, and I can't wait to get my hands on it and get started. Like I said in the previous video, we're doing Chelsea for the beta, which will be streamed over on my Twitch channel and uploaded videos to here, and we'll also be doing a West Ham save as the YouTube save to start off the year, which I'm very excited about. As I mentioned earlier, let me know your thoughts in the comment section, whether it be good or bad. I'm going to try and reply to as many comments as I can. And of course, do not forget to subscribe to the channel if you have enjoyed this video and you want to see more FM23 content as we do get closer to the game release. And also drop a like on the video as well, as it helps the channel out massively. And last but not least, once again, if you haven't already pre-ordered FM23, you can do so using my link and code with Fanatical, which I will link down in the description. You can get it for just £32.05. That'll be everything from me, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Roll on FM23. Hopefully it's going to be a good year.